Let me give you a quick test guide for resident and non-resident aliens in the United States. So here's an overview I want you to pay attention to. So basically, when we talk about tax tips for resident and non-resident aliens, it's important to establish one thing. Even if you're not an American citizen, if you live in the United States or spend a significant amount of time here, you still need to pay U.S. income tax. That's just the law. Don't try to fight it. Okay. So when we talk about resident or non-resident alien, the IRS uses two tests, the green card test and the substantial presence test, for evaluating your alien status. So if you satisfy the requirements of either one, you are considered a resident alien for income tax purposes. Otherwise, you are treated as a non-resident alien. Let me just explain a little further. So if you're an alien with a green card, meaning the U.S. Citizenship Immigration Services and Immigration Service allows you to reside in the country legally, you are a resident alien. However, if you don't have a green card and spend at least 31 days in the U.S. during the current tax year and a total of 183 days during the last 3 years, inclusive of the current tax year, you will usually satisfy the physical presence test and are also treated as a resident alien. Very important to remember that, okay? Now let's talk about counting the 183 days. When counting the number of days you are present in the U.S. during the 3-year period, you do not include every single day. Instead, what you do is you want to count only a fraction of the days into the 3 years. Suppose, for example, that you're trying to figure out your status for the 2023 tax year because you lived in the U.S. for 60 days. You count all 60 days for 2023, 1/3 of the days in 2022, and 1/6 of the days in 2021. Therefore, if you are in the U.S. for 120 days in 2022, 180 days in 2021, only exclude 40 days for 2022 and 30 days for 2021, with a total for the 3-year period being 130 days. In this scenario, you pay income tax as a non-resident alien. Okay. Also, do not count days when you are physically present in the U.S. under the following circumstances: days you commute to work in the United States from a residence in Canada or Mexico, if you regularly commute from Canada or Mexico; days you are in the U.S. for less than 24 hours when you are in transit between two places outside of the United States; days where you are in the United States as a crew member or of a foreign vessel; days you are unable to leave the United States because of a medical condition that arose while you were in the U.S.; days where you were an exempt individual. An exempt individual, for purposes of this test, refers to the following individuals. So you have an individual temporarily present in the U.S. as a foreign government-related individual under an A or G visa. You have a teacher or trainee temporarily present in the U.S. under a J or Q visa who substantially complies with the requirements of the visa. You have a student temporarily present in the U.S. under an F, J, M, or Q visa who substantially complies with the requirements of the visa. And a professional athlete temporarily in the U.S. to actually compete in a charitable sports event. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. Now let's talk about resident alien taxes versus non-resident taxes, okay? Now, let's first talk about resident alien taxes. As a legal U.S. resident, you are subject to the same tax rules as U.S. citizens. No question about it. This means what? It means that you must report all income you earn on annual tax returns, regardless of which country in which you earn it. Very important. Okay, this is for resident alien taxes. What about non-resident taxes? Well, a non-resident must also pay income taxes to the IRS, but only on the income that's effectively connected to the U.S., which generally includes the money you earn while in the U.S., but also money that you earn in connection to any activity in the U.S. For example, if you are a YouTuber and you basically are in Kazakhstan, for instance, and you receive some kind of income from YouTube, the fact that YouTube is a U.S. company, it means that the YouTube has to withhold some cash and really transfer that to the IRS. And you may have to file some taxes with the IRS. So when you prepare, actually, what I want to say here is that when we talk about non-resident taxes, everything depends upon the country. If the country has a tax treaty with the IRS also, okay? And so the IRS, however, has no authority to impose tax on the income that non-residents earn in their home countries or in any foreign country for that matter. When you prepare your U.S. tax return, you'll use Form 1040-NR. So regardless of the form you use, you will only report amounts that are considered U.S. source income. Just like resident aliens and U.S. citizens, there are deductions and credits you can claim to reduce your taxable income, okay? And all non-resident tax return forms like 1040-NR or 8843 are available with instructions on the IRS websites. And you can also use a software like TurboTax or Tax Act or Tax Layer or hmmm block to guide you through the non-resident tax return preparation process. Or you can just reach out to an accountant, to a CPA or an EA or like a tax attorney to kind of help you out, depending upon how complex your tax situation is. But bottom line is that if you are in doubt, please always reach an expert to kind of help you, or you can let us know in the comment section, and our team will get back to you. Not a problem. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about taxes for resident and non-resident status taxpayers. And so when we talk about dual status taxpayers, what is that? What does that really mean? Like, okay, in the year of transition between, let's say, being a non-resident and a resident for tax purposes, you are generally considered a dual status taxpayer. Okay, so remember that term, dual status taxpayer. So a dual status taxpayer files 2 tax returns for the year, 1 return for the portion of the year when considered a non-resident, and another return for the portion of the year considered a resident. In some situations, a taxpayer can elect to be treated as a full-year resident in the transition year to avoid having to file 2 separate returns. So it's one of those things where, again, you have to contact a specialist to really see your situation. So whether you have to file 2 forms 1040, or only 1. Okay, and the cool thing is that you have a lot of services, you have a lot of software, you also have a lot of services such as a TurboTax, you have a hmmm block, you have a lot of those services that can really help you really dissect your situation and see exactly which situation applies to your specific scenario. So it's always better to actually, reach out to those folks and have more information, more transparency into the whole process. Another thing I want to say here is that when we talk about dual status taxpayer, you also need to pay attention to the state aspect of things, because we're talking about federal taxes, but also you might have to pay taxes at the state level, depending on your connection, whether you had what's called a nexus, whether you established nexus with the state during the year. And so please check out with your state tax authorities to have a clear idea about what the tax consequences are if you are a dual taxpayer, if you're a non-resident, if you're a resident, or any kind of configuration that you can think about. Let me talk to you about the approach you need to really follow here when we talk about aliens here. Now there is an IRS publication called the 519. So basically, this is actually a U.S. tax guide for aliens. So if you want to have more information, it's just better to actually read that. It's comprehensive, though it's convoluted too. But if you have the intellectual background, just avail yourself of that resource and read what's really happening. So it's called the IRS Publication 519. This is basically the U.S. tax guide for aliens, which is basically a document the IRS publishes that details the tax procedures for aliens, individuals that are not citizens of the United States. So not all aliens are subject to U.S. taxes. So resident aliens, those who have been in the country for a defined period, are subject to taxation on their worldwide income, just as citizens are. Okay, and non-resident alien are only taxed on the income they earn while in the U.S. or in connection with the U.S. So it's one of those things where you have to understand that it's you have to reach out to the IRS if you have other questions, but you have to also make sure that if you have a connection with if you have a connection, not with the IRS, a connection with the U.S., that you need to document your income received during the year. So that means that you have to actually maintain a certain level of paper trail to be able to justify any income or any deductions that you want to claim come year end. Because see, the thing is that if you do not want to actually attract the ire, if you will, or the scrutiny of the IRS, in case that you are filing taxes and you do not have a proper documents to back up whatever claims you make on your taxes. Another thing I want to make sure you understand is that when you actually keep paper trail as a resident or non-resident alien, you have to keep that paper trail for up to 7 years. So the requirements is actually 7 years. Don't just think that, you just file taxes this year and next year it will be something else. I can just throw away all my paperwork. No. You got to keep them. That's why it's just a lot better to actually to use the online tax preparation software and actually save everything. So once you're done with the preparation and you're able to file taxes with using the software, you want to download the your Form 1040 for that year is a PDF version and save it on your computer. So it's there. It's never there. It's never gone. So if you need to actually report back to it, you can just copy and paste it. Okay. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about a tax guide for resident and non-resident aliens. Let me give you a few pro tips here. And so when we talk about resident and non-resident aliens, you need to understand that you have your situation as one person. But you also have a situation where you can have a husband and wife, for instance, who are both here in the country as residents and non-resident aliens, right? And so you have that. But you also have a situation where they have other family members with them. Maybe they have children, or they have the husband, mother, or the fathers. I mean, the father. You have all kinds of situations. Now, one thing I want to say here is that if you have family members with you and you are a resident or non-resident alien, as long as you actually spend money here on those residents in the United States, you are able to actually claim those, you are able to write off those expenses while filing your taxes. So the possibility is there for you to actually write off those expenses. However, you cannot actually you actually use the head of household sort of functionality if the dependents don't have Social Security. Like if they're not U.S. persons, okay, they need to have a Social Security number to be able to, for you to claim the head of household. And so bottom line here is that you are able to write off certain things, certain expenses, that's for sure, but you're not going to qualify for certain tax situations. Now, if you have any question about this particular sort of scenario, please let us know in the comment section, and one of our team members will get back to you. The thing is that your situation might be different. Okay, if you have a husband or if you have your spouse with you, the same applies. So if you have a U.S. connected income, you have to pay taxes on it. If you are a U.S. resident, you and your wife, or you or your wife, you need to pay taxes regardless of where you collected the income during the year. Now let's talk about how to file your federal income tax return as a resident or non-resident alien. Okay, so you'll need the forms and receipts that show the money you earned and the tax deductible expenses you paid. Right. So this include a W-2 form from each employer, other earning and interest statements, so 1099 and 1099 INT forms. So 1099 can be 1099 let's say it can be like 1099 I'm blanking here, 1099 INT, of course, but then 1099K, that's the word I was looking for, 1099K or 1099 MIS. Okay, and in some cases you have 1099 NEC, non-employee compensation. And one thing I want to say here is that so when you actually gather all documents, you need to choose your filing status. Now the filing status actually is based on whether you are married, and the percentage you pay towards household expenses also affects your filing status. Now, when we talk about paying for household expenses, remember, if you hired a nanny during the year and you actually paid the nanny more than a certain amount, you need to pay that nanny. You need to withhold taxes for on those wages that you paid, but you also need to report those wages to the IRS. You also need to pay the portion, the FICA portion of the employer portion of the FICA taxes. The third thing you want to do is to decide how you want to file your taxes. So the IRS recommends using tax preparation software to e-file for the easiest and most accurate returns. So if you file by mail, it can take up to 6 months for the IRS to process your return. I mean, it's just, especially during tax season, the agency is very busy. They have a lot of returns to sort of handle, so it's just a lot better to do everything electronically. They get the data and they process your return. But if you have to actually rely on paper, sort of paper filing, you have to wait longer. So depending on your situation, if you are filing resident or non-resident alien tax returns, and you are, for some reason, you are overseas, for instance, and you can't really do the electronic filing thing, then just expect the refund process to take longer. If you're comfortable with that, then that's not a problem. If you can wait, that's not a problem. It's just will require a little bit of patience. Another thing you have to do if you're filing taxes for resident or non-resident aliens, you need to determine if you are taking the standard deduction or itemizing your return. So everything really depends upon the tax situation for the year, the amount and nature and let's say configuration of your expenses, and also most importantly, whether you have all the proper paper trail to back up whatever expenses you plan on taking, right? It's not just about saying, I'm going to write off this, I'm going to write this off, blah, 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 blah. No. Can you prove the expenses that you are going to write off on your tax returns? It's one of those things where you have to always have all the paper trail ready, and you always have to make sure that you are able to justify if the IRS were to audit you. And again, and this applies also to your husband or wife, also to your spouse, and this applies also to your house. If you get household help, you got to keep all those payments to nannies or babysitters and so on and so forth. One thing I want to say here is that if you owe money in the scenario where you owe money, you need to actually think about making the tax payments, including applying for a payment plan in case the money you owe is a little too much. Okay, normally if you are a non-resident, your employer must have withheld a certain amount of cash from your paychecks throughout the year, so that basically the come year end, the amount you owe the IRS may not be that much. But in the event that you have a situation where you owe the IRS money, it's always important to actually make sure that you actually establish a payment plan request, or you find a situation to pay your taxes due as soon as possible. Because the thing is that you are going to start owing interest on the amount outstanding if you don't pay early. So always better to really pay as soon as possible. So the last step here is that you need to submit your return by the filing deadline. So the filing deadline for individuals is April 15th. So at mid-April, I mean, it changes every year, give or take a couple of days here and there, but it's always around mid-April. So you have to file each year. But remember that you have the ability also to file for an extension that gives you all the way to mid-October, October 15th, to actually to file your taxes. But if you owe, you have to make the payment by the due date. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. In today's conversation, I really walk you through a tax guide for resident and non-resident aliens. Let me do a quick recap here. So I gave you the overview. I also spoke to you about the approach you need to follow. And finally, talked about the pro tips. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll speak to you another time. But until then, remember, stay marvelous.